Okay, Terry, we worked together on this book, and a lot of the ideas underpinning this were based on your own experience at Livexchange and throughout your career as well. So why do you really think that it's important this year? I mean, why has flexibility for both employers and employees really become such a big deal in 2022?
First off, Mark, before we get started on that, I just want to thank you for your help in collaborating with me on this book. You're awesome, and I really appreciate all that you've done to help put this thing together. To answer your question, the pandemic has done and continues to do horrible things to the global economy, and we're all working our way through that. But if there is a silver lining to this, is that it legitimized work at home overnight. And as a result, people want that flexibility now. And so for companies that are not embracing that concept, whether it's 3 days or every day, giving people that option, it's going to be a real challenge for them from both a recruiting and a retention perspective, no matter what position they're recruiting for.
Yeah. And I mean, we've heard commentators and academics calling this the Great Resignation. And everyone disagrees about the exact definition of this, but one clear outcome is that workers are just expecting a lot more today, a lot more flexibility, home working options, flexible hours. I mean, how do you see this kind of impacting the customer service industry?
Speaking from 20 years experience in the customer service industry, when companies are doing carnivals and contests and pizza parties and cupcakes and things for your birthday, these are all great things. But what we fail to realize is that when you're still thinking about an 8-hour shift with 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch, that's just not the way the world is working today, and people want flexibility. So looking at this and saying it's not a replacement of, but an augmentation to what you're doing from a customer service experience, customer service operational perspective, can only add value to what you're doing.
So would you say that we're not just talking about work from home as the only solution then? Because if all we're talking about is transferring the 8-hour shift into the home with the 15-hour breaks in the same place and the pizza party at the end of the shift and all that kind of stuff, then we haven't really learned or moved on or applied any new kind of thinking.
It's such a great point. And I remember the conversations very vividly about work at home and the benefits of work at home as little as 4 years ago. And companies were saying, hey, look, yeah, it's definitely something of interest, but I don't think we're ready for that yet. And here we are. So look at the data and you've got in the US alone, there's over 50 million gig workers. And if you look at some of the other reports that came out for 2021, a customer service agent was one of the most in-demand jobs of the entire US. That's amazing. So why are we trying to do the same thing we've always done and expect a different result? Let's look at additional options and alternatives to not replace, but to simply augment, and that's where the real value of GigCX comes in.
And I think that one of the opportunities that I've seen, especially from talking to you, and I remember the podcast we did last year with McKinsey, where it was very clear that one of the real advantages of GigCX was being to layer it on top of an existing operation. That could be a captive BPO or an outsourced BPO. And you can do things like eliminating all your seasonality and Black Friday problems and stuff by having this kind of flexible bench available when you need it. But do you think that this idea of layering it on top of your existing solution has been clear enough? Because a lot of people I talk to still think that it's a like either or, either you're going to work with a BPO or you're going to go GigCX. And I don't think it has to be that way, does it?
It really doesn't. And here's the value of GigCX. You have an on-demand workforce that you can put whenever, wherever, and for however long that you need them. These are highly trained individuals. The training does not change. They're brand advocates. These people just don't want to work a traditional 9-to-5 job. And so leveraging this capability to benefit that part of it, and talk to an HR or a recruiting person and think about the seasonality aspect and what they have to go through. This is an amazing opportunity for them to actually have an insurance policy or an augmentation to their existing recruiting strategy to help fill this gap.
And when we're talking about the gig economy, normally we're thinking from the perspective of the employer. The employer gets more flexibility, gets that bench of people that are always available. But I think with GigCX, we're seeing a great deal of flexibility for the employee as well, and a lot of positivity, which is in contrast to how we often see the gig economy covered by the media. But let's look at GigCX. I mean, you get workers that can choose the brands that they want to work with. They can set their own hours. If they want to take Friday afternoon off, then it's possible. There's really a positive message for workers here. But what would you say to the companies that are still kind of wary, or they kind of shy away from working with the gig economy or GigCX, or even the individuals who think, well, I'd rather have a job in a contact center rather than working in GigCX?
So my first comment to those types of organizations that are on the fence would be to go back to the point, it's not an either or, it's an and. So plug it in where you need it. And then I would also encourage them to look at where their challenges are. And traditionally in the customer experience space, nights and weekends are very challenging shifts to staff. So if you just plugged it in there and said, I'm not going to change anything else, I'm just going to plug it in there and watch what happens, that's a great place to trial it out, because you're helping to solve a challenge and a need that you already have, not trying to create an opportunity. You're simply plugging a hole where you have it.
And if I'm, let's say I'm a big retailer, for example, and I already have an existing relationship with, one of the big guys, one of the CX specialists, could I talk to them about possibly partnering up with Livexchange or a similar sort of system, and actually bundling a service together so that I can layer some GigCX on top of what I'm already doing?
There's no question that you can do that. And you brought up Livexchange, and that's one of the missions that we have as an organization, is to partner with the BPO providers and to give them that additional level of flexibility. And coming from that space for the last 20 years, there is a need there. And it really is something that it doesn't matter if you're a BPO or a captive organization, looking at where this fits. Again, not a replacement of, but an augmentation to your existing strategy, can do nothing but help benefit you.
Okay, Terry, that's awesome. Thanks. The book is Don't Fear the Gig Worker, and you can just search for that on Amazon right now. And there's a copy.
Thanks, Mark.